Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of Derby City Council Cabinet on Wednesday the 13th of July at 4 o'clock. Thank you for your attendance. Karen, do we have any apologies, please?
None received.
Okay. Item 2 is for any late items, and on this occasion we do have one, which I understand the Chair of Exec Scrutiny has seen and was put to the Scrutiny Board during this week, so I think we can, Karen, and deal with that. And being as we have the paperwork, we might as well deal with that at this time. Yes, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yeah, thank you for yourself and for the Chair of Exec Scrutiny agreeing to bring this as a late item. Much appreciated. It was very urgent in nature. I'm sure members will be aware that the asset we're talking about here is not a council asset, but the closure of the bridge at Darley Abbey has been really important in terms of the community, and although the issue is not a council to resolve, clearly we are the council for this city and we need to try and step in and find solutions. So we've been working very closely with the community on Abbey Mills, Darley Mills, with the businesses and with the local community to understand the impact of the closure on them and how we best can find a solution at least as fast as possible to maintain that pedestrian link into the mill complex. So we thought until very recently it would not be possible to put a temporary bridge over the existing bridge because of the weight that would mean putting it onto that bridge. We've carried out lots of technical assessments with a variety of support, and last week it appeared this option may be possible. And the reason why we're bringing forward this option is because it's a much quicker and cheaper option than the two other options previously explored, which is the north and south of the bridge, existing bridge, which had considerable logistical issues with them around the space to crane in lifts and constraints around the space to be able to do that, and also requiring businesses to close for a period of time to have a cost impact for them. So this third option we're bringing forward to Cabinet today is really we are, as far as we understand, and we haven't done all of the checks and balances are not completed completely because there's still work going on around that, but it seems to be a feasible option to create a temporary bridge over the existing that could be done relatively quickly and at relatively low cost. The cost can be consumed within our existing capital programme. There will be an impact on officer resources to support it, and that is to be borne in mind by Cabinet. But this would give those businesses and the community there access from the pedestrian side from the river back into the community to make that more effective for them. We've been working along all the way through since the bridge was closed and before with that community. We have talked to the community about this option and there's real support. There's also a lot of interest and support from businesses locally on the mill site and beyond to crowdfund for additional funding and to support all of that. So this report is really about a temporary solution that we can bring forward relatively quickly. It does not commit the council to taking accountability for the bridge for the longer term, but there may be a recognition pragmatically that we are the provider of last resort. But this report is not dealing with that issue. It's simply a temporary bridge that will enable that community to get back accessible into the rest of the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. So it's fairly obviously the preferred option, particularly of the businesses on the mill, for it to be in its existing place rather than further down or further upriver. And I'm assuming, Martin, that will be the case. But before I go to Martin with the recommendation from scrutiny, that recommendation refers to the cost of a permanent replacement being circa 5 million. I suspect that that's premature and not helpful to try and put a figure on it at this time, particularly when we certainly as a council are not accepting responsibility or ownership of the bridge to replace it. So any figure that you put on it at the moment in time would be effectively a figure in the air.
Completely right? Speculative, yes. I mean, we have done enough technical assessments so that it's unsafe, and enough assessments to know that it is stable enough for a bridge to be put over the top of it, not resting on it, but over the top of it to be functional. But any more than that, there is no detail being carried out to know what the permanent cost would be.
Okay. So, Councillor Repton, with that caveat in mind, did you want to introduce the recommendation from scrutiny?
Thank you, Chair. I'll only be 3 minutes maximum. Thousands of local people who use this route daily have suffered serious inconvenience and disruption to their daily lives. Businesses in the mills have suffered financial loss and a drop-off in trade. People living in the mill area, Haslam's Lane and Folly Road, on the east side of the mill, have been denied access to the village, the school and other facilities. And that's why the executive scrutiny welcomes these proposals, which will hopefully lead to a temporary bridge being erected over the existing bridge within a matter of weeks. Now, this city council is facing many pressures. We're not in control at the moment, my own group, but we have sympathy. You're struggling to find the money for elderly, for children's services and many other services. And that's why we believe that the City Council on its own should not have to shoulder the short, medium and long-term costs on its own for this. And that's why in the recommendations, Chair, you'll also see that we urge Cabinet to write to the Secretary of State and Crown Estates to fund or partly fund the temporary bridge and the future permanent bridge. Now, in this Jubilee year, wouldn't it be appropriate, with Crown Estates having some responsibility, to name it the Platinum Jubilee Bridge? But in order to do that, then we would require money either from Her Majesty the Queen or the Crown Estates or the government itself. But I think they seriously need to step up to the plate, and we shouldn't be doing this on our own. But it does need to be done, Chair. Thank you.
So you welcome the recommendations? Yeah, and I'm sure you'll put all that in your local items on social media. Yeah, so that was more than 3 minutes, but there you go. We, in terms of the recommendation to write to the Secretary of State and Crown Estates, again, as I think you well know, the local MP officers and yourselves have already made many representations to those bodies, and we will continue by whatever means we can to encourage another authority, if you like, to take responsibility for this. But I have to say, my information is that those areas are more or less exhausted at the moment, but it doesn't stop us trying, if you know what I mean. So you never know what you might get if you ask for it. So, Cabinet, we have 4 recommendations. Any comments, thoughts, queries on those recommendations? No? Okay. Well, I think it's the best possible solution at this moment in time. So, with the caveat that it's something we feel a responsibility to do on behalf of the residents and the inconvenience it causes, we'll agree that process as outlined in 2.1 to 2.3, with a serious caveat that doesn't mean that we're accepting whole responsibility or ownership of the problem or the bridge. Yeah? Can we agree that, Cabinet? Thank you. It's agreed. So moving on then, receipts of any petitions?
There are none.
Okay. Urgent items to which calling will not apply.
The late item.
That was the late item, yeah? Any declarations of interest in the agenda so far? No. Minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of June. Can they be agreed? Yep, they're agreed. I will deal with the recommendations from executive scrutiny in the normal manner, item by item. So that takes us on to item 8, Food Safety Standards, Animal Feed and Health and Safety Service Plan. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. It's a standard report that comes to Cabinet every year. It's part of our requirements under the auspices of the Food Standards Agency and Health and Safety Executive to comply plans for how we're going to make sure we effectively deliver our statutory duties under inspection of food and safety and trading standards and animal feed and services across the city. These plans are being developed on the basis of the requirements of those regulatory bodies, but also take into account the COVID impact on the workforce at where we are now. We are working on recovery plans to get back to normal levels of inspections to catch up with the backlog from COVID. These staff were transferred and deployed in different places to support COVID response during the COVID time, and therefore we have and every council in the country has large backlogs in these areas that need to be fulfilled. So we are working on that base, and it will take a few years for us to get back to pre-pandemic levels. But these are worked through on the basis of our prioritisation of the premises that are and businesses that are most at priority risk to residents, and that is coded through on the priority list as we carry out those inspections in that order. So it's pretty much a standard report, and have to take any questions on that, Chair.
Standard report, but quite detailed. Any questions, comments, queries on that? Because executive scrutiny looked at it and resolved to note the report, so there was nothing from there. Any queries from Cabinet? Who does this come under now? You, Jerry, yeah? Anything to add?
Just like to follow up what Rachel said. There was a backlog because of COVID, but having been out with the food standards team towards the latter end of last year, I know how rigorous the inspections are, so it is going to take a bit of time to catch up with the backlog, but I know that the team that they've got there will catch up with these as soon as possible.
Okay, in that case then we've got recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. Can they be agreed? Thank you. Moving on then, it moves us on to the Ascend Capital Programme. Paul, sorry, Andy.
Paul can do it if he likes, but I'll step in. Thank you, Chair. So last September, Cabinet agreed that we could run a consultation on the proposed use of Ascend capital funding, which was duly undertaken and in which we received a very high response rate, some 223 in total. The purpose of this report is to seek agreement from Cabinet to progress with phase 1 of the proposals, noting that there was overwhelming support for the proposals we put out for consultation. There are 2 key sets of proposals in phase 1: to create an additional 45 places at the Kingsmead Special School for young people of secondary school age who have social, emotional and mental health needs, and develop an additional 13 places at Ivy House Special School for children with social, communication and interaction needs. The rationale for these proposals is outlined in the main body of the report. These proposals are very much in line with our strategy for SEND, which was agreed at Cabinet back in 2020 around creating the right places for children and young people with a SEND need, so that as many children as possible can have their needs met in local provision. In due course, there will be a further reports to Cabinet outlining the next 2 phases of the SEND capital programme once these have been co-produced and developed with the local area based on the proposals we originally put out for consultation. I would ask Cabinet to approve recommendations 2.1 and 2.2.
Thank you, Andy. So Cabinet Exec Scrutiny looked at this last night and came with a recommendation, and I'll read it out. The Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to agree to pass its thanks to officers, both to commend and recognise their hard work on this over many months, and it was also recognised as the valuable input and guidance of local organisations, partners and parents, to whom, without their input and good work with officers, we wouldn't have had this proposed enhanced provision, and none of this would have been possible. So absolutely the Cabinet will recognise that and concur with those thoughts. Very tricky area of work to get a solution, cross-party agreements and the benefit of special educational needs children is massive, and congratulations to everybody involved. Councillor Williams, your Cabinet members responsible. Martin, did you want to come in there?
Well, I couldn't have put it better myself if I'd been invited, Chair, but I would have tried. But no, seriously, the thanks and appreciation are well deserved, and I think the whole of the executive scrutiny supported this enthusiastically, and rightly so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to Executive Scrutiny for understanding and appreciating that. This has been a long journey. It's not finished yet. We have a lot of work to do, but I'm really proud of the team's work. The local area have worked together. We've now come on this journey together. We are producing results, and I'm really, really proud of the work that's gone into starting off this programme. So I hope Cabinet can agree with me and and approve these recommendations in front of you, but also to say thank you to all of the partners involved in the local area, including our parent carers, Together Forum and other groups around the SEND agenda, who have all taken part, who've had their voices listened to, and we are really hopeful that moving forward, once the whole programme has been put into place, that we will have a SEND programme and a SEND arena to be very proud of. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved in this, and we know that if we continue to work together, we will get it right, we will get it the right time, the right place, and make sure that it's done properly. So thank you to everybody, and long may we continue to work together to achieve these outcomes.
Thank you, and you'll convey it to the team, the message to the team in due course.
Absolutely.
Good, welcome. Yes, Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yes, this certainly is obviously the first one of three, so it is a good start. One plea I would make is that the Parent Carer Forum is not the only representative body of parents in the city, and that the other bodies that represent parents should also be included in future consultations that take place. Also, obviously, when this first round phase is completed, I presume we have some sort of modelling as to, obviously, if we're not having to send children outside of Derby to more expensive placements, how much money that will actually release in that process.
Okay, Andy, thoughts on inclusivity and the level of savings? Either of you?
Okay, just to respond briefly, the consultation was open to everybody in Derby City, whether that was a professional that works in a school or a parent, a member of a parent carer forum or any other group that advocates for parents. So it was very much a consultation for all, and I think the response, the 223 responses, I think is really positive. And as I said in the introduction to the report, there was overwhelming support for the recommendations, which is really good. There's a huge amount of work going on at the moment, Councillor Skelton, in terms of the kind of provision that we need in order to try and ensure that we can have the right children in the right schools, ideally within a mainstream school with appropriate support, or in an enhanced resource unit within a school, to try and reduce the demand for out-of-area placements going forward. And we have got a high number of children in out-of-area placements, and more than I would like, and that does put a significant pressure on the high needs block, and you'll see that, I think, in the outturn paper, which we're covering later on Cabinet. So the work that we are doing is about trying to ensure that for children coming into the system, we have the right provision in the right place for those children, that is ideally locally, that starts to mitigate and reduce the demand for out-of-area placements going forward, whilst also ensuring that we've got really robust arrangements around how we commission those placements, so we're getting value for money in terms of those children that are placed in out-of-area arrangements, but also through reviewing education, health and care plans and trying to review those plans at key points in young people's journeys and their transition, that we are also taking opportunities appropriately and where it's in the right interests for those children to try and step children down. But I do appreciate that that can be very challenging because of a whole range of reasons, including parental preference, but we need to look at things holistically in that sense. And we're doing a huge amount of work that I haven't got time to get into now around what some of that forecasting, projections and modelling looks like, both in terms of numbers based on needs, but also in terms of costs as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to give some pointers, absolutely aware that there are other groups within the city, and what Andy hasn't mentioned there is the work that the director has been doing with those other groups to make sure that their voices are heard, which is absolutely right. But we will continue to to do that in the future. One of the main things that we have to do is a local area, so it's not just the council, it's all of our partners involved in this. It's about creating the confidence of parents to actually choose our special schools, our outstanding special schools. Outstanding is a really good word for today. But it is about raising the parents' confidence that they can send their children to our schools, and the outcomes that they get at those schools are outstanding outcomes as well, so that they can go on to live their best life, which is what our motto is all about. The data has been developed over the last 4 years, and in fact we've got a much better database, and we have a better way of analysing it and making sure that we use the correct data, and then we've got all of that to turn into intelligence so that it actually focuses what we're doing. We've used that data on our demand management board, and we are seeing some results there. So I'm confident moving forward that we are doing all the right things to make sure that we get this absolutely right.
Thank you for the outstanding and remarkable report that you've brought to Cabinet today. Any other comments, thoughts on the subject? In that case, we've got recommendations 2.1, 2.2. Can they be agreed? Agreed. Moving on to item 10 then, in the Derby Holiday Activity Food Programme, Andy.
Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is for Cabinet to approve the acceptance of funding from the Department for Education for the years 22-23 and 24-25 to deliver activities and food across the city for children eligible for free school meals in the delivery of the DfE's Holiday Activities and Food Programme, often referred to as the HAF programme. As has been the case to date, which has worked successfully in Derby, the funding will be allocated through a mixed delivery model in partnership with Community Action Derby and be allocated via a grant. Cabinet will be aware that the programme provides food and activities for free school meal eligible children and young people over certain weeks across the Easter, summer and Christmas holidays. Strong local partnerships have been the basis for the success of the programme in 21-22, and that really shaped the programme in 22-23. And subsequent years, along with CAD and a wide range of voluntary sector organisations, have been involved and will continue to be so going forward, working with our schools. So I would ask Cabinet to approve recommendations 2.1 to 2.7.
Okay, so Exec Scrutiny looked at this and resolved to note the report. For me, there's some excellent work gone into this as well, and thanks to government for providing the ability to provide these services, which have been extremely well received where they've taken place. And again, thanks to the officers who've organised it and the partners that help us deliver it. So, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Again, I would like to echo, first of all, our thanks to the teams here at the Council that have been working on this in depth over the last couple of years, but also moving forward to thank Community Action Derby and the model that we're now presenting to you in the way of moving forward, and the work that they're doing with the voluntary sector and community groups out there, and to our schools for the provision that they're putting on. And there's some really exciting provision out there. Looking forward to hearing some of the activities that are going on and to joining in some of them over the summer and going to have a look at what they're doing. So I want to say thank you to all of those providers that have come forward to help with this programme. And obviously, as it says in 2.3, the model moving forward, we will keep an eye on that between Andy and myself and make sure that if there are improvements to be made to the model, that we will make those. But I think this is a really good model with Community Action Derby and our voluntary sector providers and our schools. So thank you very much, Chair. I hope you can agree with the recommendations.
Thank you. Any comments, thoughts? Yes, Councillor Schenker.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, yeah, I agree that there was some excellent provision last year, eventually, when these activities got up and running. Prior to that, it was a little bit chaotic. Community Action didn't even know they were receiving the money to deliver or being expected to administer and get groups to deliver all these activities. So a bit better planning this year will really help do that. I'm just a little bit confused as to the timings of when this grant was awarded and when we're planning to spend it, because the 7.2 in the report, it says 80% of the grant is to be paid in April 22. Is that paid to us, or is that us paying to Community Action Derby if the decision hasn't been made yet to pay them until a few moments' time? How could we be paying out a grant, or have we already received the grant? That just needs clarifying. Also at 2.7, it looks like previously we'd committed to £226,000 from elsewhere to provide half activities, but now are we saying now we've got a grant, we're going to use the grant money instead? Why can't we enhance the services rather than trying to, move money from one pot to another? We all agree it's an excellent programme, so we should try. We should try and maximise the funding for that. And then at 7.4, and I'm sure there's work to be done at the council to administer this grant, but the creation of a full-time post for £45,000 if Community Action Derby are administering this grant and dealing with all the activities and allocating the grant. Why do we need another officer at the council? What would be the purpose of that officer post?
Andy, Simon on the finance side of things, but Andy first.
I mean, my reading of 7.2 is about the DFE funding coming from government to the council and then for the council to determine how it's going to deploy that funding as part of the HAF programme. And obviously we're coming here today to make that decision via Cabinet, and then it will be for the group that is described in the report to determine how that's going to be spent through making a grant directly to Community Action Derby. So I think there is continuity in terms of the programme maintaining during the holiday period. And I don't disagree. I think it's about absolutely maximising the income that we get from the DFE, learning from how the previous programmes have run. And I think, just to reflect on your point, Councillor Shankar, I think that, we were also running this programme during COVID. So at the first part, certainly during 2020, 21, 22, we had a lot of activities that were virtual, and then we were into a more kind of blended approach. And I think there was a lot of learning by doing, and I don't think we are unusual in that respect. But as it says in the report, there's a huge amount of very detailed reporting back to the DFE. Believe me, I mean, it is very, very detailed, prescriptive and fairly forensic reporting back in terms of numbers of children and activities and all the kind of mechanics of how and what's run. And the DFE have been assured in terms of the approach that we've taken here in Derby. In terms of the coordinator role, I think that the amount of work that needs to be done to make this happen should not be underestimated, not just in terms of how and what's reported back, but in terms of the work with CAD in terms of coordination and deployment and measuring impact and measuring outcomes and all the things that we're required to do as part of the DFE. And, the Learning and Inclusion Service where this sits is a very lean service, and we formed a view, and it's permissible in terms of the conditions of the grant, that this capacity was required because this is now very much a permanent programme. It was initially seen to be something that was probably going to be time limited, but as far as we understand, the government have committed to this as an ongoing programme, so we just need to make sure that we are as agile and on the front foot in terms of how we deliver this programme for the benefit of children and young people in Derby.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, Councillor Williams.
It's also because there's sort of two parts of it. So the Community Action Derby are working with the voluntary sector in terms of doing that, and what you'll see in the report is that it's the team that Andy's just mentioned there that will be working with all of our schools who can also put on activities and programmes there. So it's that coordination side there within that small team that we're looking for in that post.
And just for clarity, it's funded from the grant? The post will be funded from the grant? Okay. Good. Any
so
other
another
comments?
positive story. So.
Sorry, Yvonne.
Said it's another positive story.
Good.
Great news for our young people.
Okay, any other comments, thoughts? We've got, then in that case, items 2.1 to 2.7. Can they be agreed recommendations? Thank you. Item 11 then is the appointment of an academy sponsor for Snellsmore, another new school at Snellsmore Grange on Bolton Moor. Andy.
Thanks, Chair. So a new housing development is proposed at Snellsmore Grange, Bolton Moor for 1,000 dwellings. A new primary school for 315 pupils with a 39-place nursery is proposed to open in September 2023, located within the development, with the work starting this summer. The Council has held a competition process in line with the Department for Education guidance to identify a sponsor to open a new school. Following a detailed evaluation of bids, this report seeks approval to recommend to the Secretary of State the highest scoring bidder as the Council's preferred sponsor. The DfE asks that the preferred sponsors are not made public until the Secretary of State has taken the final decision to appoint a sponsor. An additional confidential report is provided to Council Cabinet and set out in Part 2, confidential Cabinet report, which we'll cover later. At this point, I would ask Cabinet to approve recommendations 2.1 and 2.2.
Councillor Williams, anything to add on this being on your portfolio? Any questions or comments? Because exec scrutiny looked at this last night. I'll come back to you in a minute, Alan. I made a recommendation that, and it says, in the light of the current state of City Council finances. Oh, that's a different one, is it? Oh, yes, it goes to the next item. Yeah, sorry. Exec scrutiny resolved to note the report last night. So, yes, Alan and Councillor Graves.
Thank you. I was interested to note that Andy said that that the sponsor is secret until it's announced. I don't understand the logic of that. I mean, why can we not suggest, say, what our recommendation is? I don't understand why it should be a secret matter. It just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, either the government will decide that it's them, or they won't. The other question is there any funding in here from the county council? Because this school will actually take on some of the county council area, and I wonder if they've put any funding into this.
So, Andy, confidentiality at this point and county's involvement?
I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable question from Councillor Graves around the confidentiality nature, but they are the rules from the DfE. I think the reason for it is because although there were a number of bids and there was a preferred academy sponsor following the evaluation process, the Secretary of State may still change his or her mind when he or she considers all of the applications. So I think ultimately the Secretary of State reserves the right to change their view, and so if we were to announce it in public, that sponsor might be very disappointed if that's later then contradicted by the Secretary of State. So I think that's the reason why. In terms of the funding, I would need to take that away specifically to ask. I mean, what I can say in terms of generality is that there is certainly a huge amount of discussions that take place between city and county, where you've got schools on the borders, where there are new housing developments, and there are very good relationships between Gamel's team around school place planning and the county in order to maximise efficiencies and funding. But if you want specifics around that, Councillor Graves, I'll take that away so I can answer that correctly. Thank you.
So in terms of the confidentiality, Alan, it's the DfE's rules, not ours, and is the reason for that. And on finances, I'm afraid that's symptomatic of bolt-on developments around the city, isn't it? That those developments take advantage of the infrastructure within the city, and yet they get the rates and everything else that goes with it. So, any other comments, questions? No. In that case, we've got recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. Can they be agreed? Agreed. Thank you. So, item 12 then is community managed libraries. Rachel.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this report, just for absolute clarity, is dealing with the libraries in the city that are not designated as statutory libraries. We have 5 of those that the council runs across the city. But in 2016, after the undertaking of a strategic needs assessment, 10 of the community libraries were designated not to be in that statutory group, and therefore are managed as community libraries. Really, this report is highlighting the critical role that libraries play in meeting the needs of local people, the central role that a library or community building plays around building capacity, capability, resilience, connection, all of those things that we saw through the pandemic being exacerbated, tenfold. But what we also recognise is that the model the council introduced after that review work in 2016, the community managed library model, a particular model, has been tested and stressed in ways that were not originally anticipated. So the pandemic has impacted on their ability, and just for members to be clear, we transferred, we leased those 10 libraries to direct help and advice, which are a Derby-based voluntary organisation to run those 10 libraries. The model originally anticipated them being able to access additional external funding to bring into those libraries to make them be effective. It also assumed access to volunteers to be able to run those libraries using the volunteer time, and a viable financial model that would work to continue the delivery of those libraries. COVID has driven a horse and coaches through that reality. It has made access to volunteers very difficult. The population that generally volunteer in a library are of a particular age who were asked to self-isolate during COVID, and that reduced the capacity. It also dried up the level of external funding opportunities that may have been available to receive, and generally the model was, and also the stresses and strains of opening and closing during COVID, all of those things have made it more difficult. A really clear discussion within our partnership space at the Community Recovery Board to look at what we want to do in longer term, and a real, I think, societal recognition of the need for community spaces for people to come together, to learn, find out things, connect generally, be able to access advice, support, a whole range of activity, and really the role of a library in a local community as being so pivotal to that and pivotal to the community recovery of our city. A real opportunity to look again at our model around running these libraries in our city. So what has been, what the report is trying to put across really for Cabinet is that we want to take a more hub-based approach. We want to look much more holistically at how these spaces could be used more effectively. And what we want to do is ask our key partner in Community Action Derby, who's the umbrella organisation for the voluntary and community sector in the city, to carry out an independent review with the stronger board, the broader reach of voluntary community organisations, to look at our model and see what better model there may be to maintain these really important services for the future. And absolutely linking into our remodelling of how we work in locality, our better together approach about how we work with communities and work in different ways. So all options are on the table on how we maintain that. The report is clear, recognising the important role libraries play and absolute commitment to the continuation of those spaces. Also to recognise that DHA have been unable to make this work under the existing grant model they have, and to therefore accept from them their notice to withdraw from that agreement at the end of this year in November, and if required, if the review is not complete and conclusive by that point, to transfer those libraries back into the council's ownership and management, so we maintain a seamless service and there is no loss of those libraries in the meantime. And clearly the review will bring back a further report with detail about how that would look and what models we're going to be suggesting and recommending to Cabinet in the autumn of this year. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. So again, the recommendations make the situation quite clear actually, but Exec Scrutiny looked at this last night, and Martin, you might need to provide a bit of explanation around the first part of the recommendation, in that it states that in the light of the current state of the council finances, where there's an underspend, I'm not sure which underspend.
I think, well, I don't want to move on to item 13. I'm sure my leader will go into this in much greater detail under the next item. But it seems from the paper that the gloomy prediction of £11 million overspend is not quite the situation. And what executive scrutiny was suggesting was that there was leeway to actually look more positively at our much-loved libraries. And I think executive scrutiny were reflecting the actual people in this city who wanted Cabinet really to reassure them that the libraries will remain open, all of them, and also to explore the possibility of bringing them back under council control. Because my understanding is that libraries are a semi-statutory responsibility. And attached to that, we understand that finances are stretched and that really Cabinet ought to be approaching the government for additional funding for libraries via government intervention. Thank you, Chair.
The one reassurance I can give you, Councillor Repton, is that, as has just been said by the officer, all options are open. The report clearly talks of the need to do a review, so for us to preempt that review and give you promises will...
Can you rule out an option to close, though?
The option, the ability for us at this point to give you categoric reassurances that they will stay open forever is not possible. What the recommendations say is that we will commit to keeping the CMLs open whilst the review is ongoing, and then we'll deal with the recommendations of the review when it comes back in report form. So, and as for government involvement, you know, because it was your administration that dealt with this and put the recommendations forwards in terms of community managed libraries and the identification of the 5 statutory libraries that we keep to fulfil our statutory duties here in Derby in terms of library provision. So to think that and that's our responsibility, and the funding for that is in the preset that we get from government. So for us to write to government to ask them to support our community managed libraries, you might as well whistle in the wind as to try something like that for which they don't really have a responsibility. So in terms of the recommendation, there's not a lot in there that we can actually agree. So any other comments, questions? Yes, Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, at the time when the community managed libraries were being proposed and pushed by Labour, I did voice my deep concerns as to how long they would actually remain open in that format. Evidence from around the country is mixed, particularly in urban areas. It isn't that fantastic. So unfortunately, I'm not surprised that we are in the situation we are. But I too would very much want the council to find a way to make sure, even if you have to sort of reimagine libraries in some sense, broaden what they do, that we actually do keep those buildings open and the services from them.
And I think officers have addressed that potential by talking about looking at the service holistically and looking at the potential for hub involvement and things. So a really detailed review. So I've got Councillor Graves, then Councillor Eyre.
Thank you. We were told that DHA were the experts and they were the saviours of our library complement. It seems that those who protested against moving to primary volunteer base were right. Now we will have to see which of these libraries will survive the council's budgetary cuts. And listening to what you said, Councillor Poulter, it sounds to me like we're not going to get the funding in our budgetary base for these extra libraries, and it sounds to me like the death knell is already sounding.
Let me be perfectly clear on that. That's just really silly, sort of preempting the outcome of what will be a detailed, deep dive assessment of the library service. So if you want to put something like that in your materials, then that's up to you, but it's not the actual case. So I've got Councillor Shanker that's indicated. Do you want to go first, Matt, or after Councillor Shanker?
Thank you, Chair. I think it'd help if Councillor Graves actually read the report, because I think his response or contribution may be a little bit more informed if he did that. And just answering Councillor Skelton's original concerns, absolutely we brought these proposals on. As the report says at the beginning of paragraph 2 in 2016, a response to austerity, and a corporate decision was made because of the reduced provision we had. And as a response to austerity, what we managed to do is keep every single library in Derby open. There were proposals.
Sorry, just to be clear, we followed through on the recommendations that came. But actually, Councillor Shanker, we're looking to the future now.
Absolutely. But
they've given it a good 4-year go, but we now clearly need to review it again and look for a different solution.
I just wanted to make the point that no library has closed in Derby despite the severities of austerity that we've had, and this council has been impacted worse than most. But I think what we should do is look forward. We should ensure that this review is holistic. I believe there's opportunities which were missed in the last 4 years, but the pandemic obviously didn't help that. The provision of a library we should be looking at what else can be brought into libraries, what other services can be delivered from libraries to enhance the offer, and I'm pretty sure the saving overall to the council could be even bigger than it is. A couple of lessons need to be learnt, and I think you'd probably agree with me, Chair. We've not made it particularly easy for DHA to deliver this provision. We had budget set for 4 years, and yet we managed to spread that budget across 5 years instead of 4. That's made it harder. There's still, 4 years into this, there's still issues around GDPR which have promised to be resolved, haven't been resolved. That's hindered DHA's ability to recruit and retain volunteers. There's issues around insurance, rents and rates, a whole number of issues which I think proactively I'll ask the administration to get right behind and help resolve those issues, not just for DHA but any other provider that can be to look after the libraries. It was at the time one provider had come and offered to take on all 10. But I think we shouldn't rule out if different providers wanted to come in and look after a smaller amount of libraries. So we have several providers offering different services. That should also be considered. I offer either myself or somebody from our group to help with that review if that's needed, because I think it's really, really important we all get behind this and make sure we give the review the best possible chance to make sure we continue to keep all libraries open and none are closed. And I understand what the exec scrutiny are saying. I understand your position of not being able to give categorical promises forever. I don't think they're asking this forever for trillions and trillions of years, Chair, just to make it clear. I think it's just a commitment from the administration that the intention is not to close any libraries. Thank you, Chair.
And that's in the recommendations in terms of up to the point of the review, and we'll obviously review that decision when we get the review of the libraries and take it forward from there. So, good. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Eyre, your portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the feeling behind this recommendation, I really do, but unfortunately it's asking us to make a permanent predetermination of the review, which is not something that we should be inclined to do. And I watched there, the camera wouldn't have picked it up, but I watched as Councillor Repton and Councillor Shanker were staring at yourself, Chair, and then at each other, gazing into each other's eyes, looking for the moment they had the headline for the next Labour Party newsletter. So the headline is this: we are not embarking on this review with the intention of closing the libraries. I want to make sure that is understood. That is not why we embark on this review. We embark on the review because the future of libraries needs to change. This review is about what libraries could be, how we could enhance their offer, how we can increase the footfall, and how we can increase the number of volunteers who are selflessly giving up their time to maintain and run the libraries. It is not embarked on with the intention to close them. And we can't make any kind of predeterminations like that, and libraries are going to have to change. When I was younger and my grandparents took me to the library, it was 90% books, 10% videos. It then changed into being DVDs. It then changed into being computers, which changed to laptops, which changed to printers and scanners and copiers. Libraries have always been changing, and this review is about how they're going to change over the next few years. That's why we're embarking on it. And as Chair, you pointed out, there are a number of options on the table. We'll consider them, and when the review's completed, it'll be coming back to us to consider the options from there.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've got recommendations 2.1 to 2.5. Can they be agreed? Yep. Okay. So item 13, final accounts. Simon.
So thank you for this, Chair. So this is the outturn for the financial year 21-22. Just to set the context, obviously this came on top of 2020-2021, where the COVID restrictions and the COVID uncertainty were still running into the current financial year. And when the budget was set originally, it included amounts for COVID placeholder budgets to reflect that there was uncertainty in respect of some of our costs and some of our income. And the report details how the Council throughout the year both reported and mitigated against that context. So the report does indicate that as a result of both service spend and the application of funding streams, including additional income from health, COVID reserve, which was carried over from the previous year, and other areas, we managed to end the year with a 2.836 million underspend that has been able to go into the reserves. The application of the funding sources is detailed in paragraph 4.1.7, and they have been reported throughout the year to help members understand what was in itself a very volatile year. I think it's important to point out that there was a 1.265 overspend on services, on the services budgets, which I think reflects that impact of COVID, both in terms of provider costs, in terms of emerging inflation and the pay award that was granted, in terms of income and many other items which are detailed in Appendix 6. But throughout the year, that service overspend reduced very significantly as a result of the mitigations that the council put in place, such as the spending review panel and the placement review panel. And some of the success of that is shown in the figures and also in the graphs in the report, which shows, for example, a reduction in the number of looked after children despite increases in cost of that provision. So there was a 1.265 overspend on services, and the report details that. I think the other area that, just before I go into some of the categories in here, is that throughout the year, the government continued to support local authorities in what was called contained outbreak management funding. So that was very much to help us respond to the ongoing public health issue, and we sought to maximise that funding in keeping the city safe, keeping the city responding to COVID. And the report, though it's difficult to extract exactly where that went, maximise the conf funding. So overall, if I can just bring out a couple of the strands here, the report details a delivery of 86% of the savings that were set out. That is either directly set out and agreed by council prior to this financial year, or in other savings that we put in place. The report details that one area where we struggled to deliver a saving was in respect of the opening of the Willows home, which is primarily about difficulties in recruiting residential care workers. And again, during last year, the council has implemented a number of schemes to improve our ability to both recruit and retain in that area. So again, it's pleasing that 86% of the savings target is detailed in this report. The report talks about, as I mentioned earlier, the increase in cost. For example, a 17% increase in an average cost of a residential placement, 10% increase in cost in independent foster care. And if you've been keeping in touch with some of the national reviews about the care markets and the children's care market, you can see that this is not an experience just met in Derby, but is being mirrored around the country, which makes the need for sufficiency in provision of social care really important as part of the government's agenda, and we hope that might come about. Just maybe going on to the capital programme, the outturn was 112 million spend against 133 million agreed programme as reported in Q3, so 20 million slippage and underspend. That includes, that obviously is built on the slippage that we reported in the year from the original capital programme of approximately 270 million. And during the year, we reported slippage on some of the bigger schemes like the mobility programme and other programmes that needed to be reprofiled. The Treasury Management budget allowed 1.141 million to be transferred to the Treasury Management Reserve. That's as a result of our Treasury Management activity, but also, obviously, Treasury Management is linked to the capital programme delivered in the year, and that's been moved into a targeted reserve to help us smooth it over the number of years. The HRA showed a deficit of 191,000, which is a 0.33% deficit against their total income. Again, they experienced increased voids and obviously rent arrears as a result of coming out of COVID, but we don't expect that to be an ongoing pressure. The dedicated schools grant shows a 2.8 million deficit at the end of the year, and that is primarily linked to an increase in activity. In the earlier report, we talked about the number of children who currently have to go out of the city to receive specialist education. That increased from about 280 to 360 pupils, and that's as a result of an 11% increase in education healthcare plans. So, and finally, in this explanation, we also had a collection fund deficit at the end of the year. That's council tax and business rates of about £4.8 million, and that was an improved position of about £3 million from what was reported in quarter three. So I think if I was to probably summarise the year, we entered into it with a level of uncertainty. We identified pressures early on as a result of inflation and everything else. We brought in mitigations, we maximised government funding, and it's pleasing at the end, after transacting all the decisions that the council has made, that we came in with a 2.8 million deficit, which has gone back into the surplus that has gone into the reserves. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, on the content of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Clearly, in the business of financial projections and estimates and things is difficult at any time, but when it's complicated by the pressures and the COVID effect and things over the last 12 months, I think we did extremely well, so thank you for your efforts on that. Executive scrutiny looked at this last night and resolved to note the report. Councillor Repton indicated that it would be for Councillor Schenker to try and score some political points on this one before he left. So I'm going to ask if there's any questions, comments or any political point scoring. Councillor Schenker.
Thank you, Chair. You seem to be a little bit nervous. I wonder why. But hey-ho, let's carry on. I don't plan to take too much of your time, to be honest, because I don't think you'll understand half of the points that I'm going to make. I don't think you yourself, your third choice Cabinet Member for Finance, and indeed most of your Cabinet really understand the report. And I'll challenge you to answer some of these questions yourself rather than relying on the Section 151 officer if you want to really prove a point. The bottom line is these figures show council tax for the year 21-22 didn't need to be raised by the maximum amount of 4.99% that you chose to do. The proof is in the actual figures. But more worrying, I mean, this time last year, maybe just a little bit later than this, you were predicting soon after setting the budget, a quarter after setting the budget, should I say, you were predicting an 11.6 million overspend. 3 months later, you were saying, oh, don't worry about it, it's 8.1 million overspend. Then you were saying it's a 4.8 million overspend at the end of quarter three. The table in the report says spend was predicted to be £258 million, and it's actually £252 million. So you'd question why is the table showing a 6 million or 6.2 million underspend, and yet you're reporting a £2.86 million underspend, but yet, as the finance officer has highlighted already, at 4.19, you say the actual revenue budget was 1.2 million overspent. So hopefully you can answer some of those questions also. And rather than go into too much of the detail, which I will pick up with the finance officer when we get time, looking at those projections from quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, and indeed the totality for the year, what reassurances can you give me, and more importantly, what reassurances Councillor Poulter and Smale can you give the public is in the next few weeks when you report quarter one for this current financial year, we're not going to be staring a massive budget hole again. If you continue with the trajectory of the last 4 quarters, we should quite comfortably be within the budget envelope of this current financial year, surely.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. You did quite a good job there of explaining what a good job we did to be able to keep the overspends down to a minimum. And in terms of reassurances for the first quarter of the... I didn't interrupt you, Councillor Shank. In terms of predicting the outcome of the outturn for the first quarter, we're not in that game. We'll deal with the facts as and when they come. Councillor Smale, your portfolio, do you feel the need to answer those in any more detail, or are you going to let Councillor Schenker talk to the finance team?
Thanks, Chair. I find it quite frustrating that we always come round to every quarter report or every outturn, even when I was in other cabinet member roles, that there's always this mudslinging in regards to overspends, underspends and use of reserves. I think what the teams have achieved here at the end of a turbulent year, which we're nowhere near out of yet, I do fear for this year because there's a lot of things on the table that are coming our way. Got the pay award, which obviously will be discussed at full council next week. There's also proposals. I mean, we've just talked about underspend being used for libraries. The Labour Party proposing of the bus corp coming back, which would, you know, if that would ever to happen, would hemorrhage us millions. So we have got a lot of things on our way that we've got to really grapple and navigate. And it's just disappointing that we always keep going around in the same circle of mudslinging over the finances, and yet I get seldom support from the opposition in looking for alternative things. Councillor Shanker, you meet me once or twice when red lines and budgets come up, but there's been no two-way dialogue, and we'll always continue to lobby central government. I know that they always opposition like to bash us on the head, you know, with the nasty Tory stick to say that we're not going to lobby our own government. I mean, we continuously do that. But there's some positive work that has been outlined in this last year in particular. Most notably, what Andy's and Yvonne's team have done in children's services, because we have an incredibly broken care market, and we've got the consequences in Roy's portfolio that's going to come staring down our way soon with the adult social care reform. I believe recently, I'm going to probably quote an incorrect number here, but the last I was told in looked after care children that we've gone down to 618, which is probably the lowest we've attained ever for quite some time. Now, if we didn't have those kind of works and mitigations, as Simon has explained, around the demand management and looked after placement boards that we do have, the severity of our finances and our budgets would be in a much severe situation. And I think for the last 2 years, we have also had the luxury of COVID grants coming towards the council. Now we're at the stage of where that is dried out, and I'm hoping whoever the next incumbent as our Prime Minister and our next Secretary of States and Chancellors, that we'll be able to have a proper conversation with them to have a sensible, honest conversation around local government finance. The ambition is still there. I really want a 3-year settlement. I think our finance officers really desire for a 3-year settlement. We really need that stability moving forward. So, you know, we'll continue to work on the finances, and I'm still open to all the ideas that you know, coming forward for anyone that can help us to try and work together on this. But I'm not going to deny that we have got an incredibly tough year ahead where I think that we would probably struggle to attain some of the savings that we achieved last year. And that's being an incredibly honest position, because I'm not going to try and pull the wool over anyone's eyes on that situation. So that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Thanks very much, Chair. There has been a huge amount of hard work that's been going into this. The Demand Management Board is one area that we have really made sure that we've done the work across the corporate arena, and that we are all working together to try and come up with solutions that will give us answers to that, but we're also scrutinising and asking all the right questions. And that's why you'll see a bit of a variance there. But there's one major thing that everyone in this room can do, and actually the general public can do, and that's to become foster carers. So if you have a spare bedroom and a spare bit of love and support to give, get in contact with us, because that can make all the difference to our children and young people and their outcomes and their lives, but also to the budget. So come on, step up the recruitment campaign, each and every one of you. Try and get at least one foster carer come forward for Derby City Council, so that our kids can have a nice, safe, secure environment to thrive in.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Barker.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
No, I've got to come back. I've got to move on.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Chair. I always find it incredulous that when we get to this stage of a budgetary process, that some people just can't grasp the fact that a budget is a snapshot into the future. And in every case, there are things come along the way, and this year, luckily, and with the help of our officers, and officers finding new ways of working and saving those sort of things, that we've come up with an underspend. I mean, at the top of the year, just to put it into context with your own lives, at the top of the year, you look at what you've got to spend over the next year. We all know electric and gas has gone up. If by this time next year, my gas and electric account's still in the black, I shall pat Mrs. Barker on the head and take her out for a meal. And that's what this should be. Our officers should, in actual fact, have a pat on the head. I don't know how to take them out for a meal, but at the same time, you know, it's deserved that they are congratulated on being able to bring the budget in on an underspend. And that money will be used, obviously, elsewhere in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, further comments from Cabinet? Yes, Councillor Webb. Councillor Shanker, this is a Cabinet meeting, not a scrutiny meeting, and I've got business. I've got the business to carry on through.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say on adult social care, as it's been mentioned that there's been an underspend, we've been very fortunate to get lots of help and assistance, not only in government grants, but in grants from the health service itself, to smooth the way for people moving out of hospital back into the community, so that hospital beds can be made available to people that need. We have worked tirelessly, or the team have worked tirelessly, in trying to improve outcomes for people, particularly older people across the city. And that work with Live Well, Move More Derby and other organisations is helping to change the trend, or instead of being reactive to health conditions, to be proactive and helping people to remain healthier for longer, because I think we all want to live a long and healthy life, but unfortunately some people are not doing that, and we are doing the best to encourage that. with all that work that we're doing, we have now got the issue of inflation, and we're seeing care costs rising, and that will be a challenge for us in the future. But over this past 12 months, the work has been incredible. You will note in the report that the housing revenue account, that there is a deficit. It was proposed to be a larger deficit, so that is good news. The housing revenue account is part of a 30-year business plan whereby our tenants at Derby Homes make the contribution through their rent, and we have a programme of maintenance and improvements to properties as well as new build, and that work is ongoing. And I did note that last year there was a proposal to reduce the rent rise that was recommended and accepted by Derby Homes, but when it came to council there was a recommendation to reduce that rent rise, and without that rent rise we wouldn't be looking at the green agenda that Derby Homes has been working on, not just in my time as cabinet member, but over the decade, the last 20 years since the housing standard was introduced. And we are now at the point where that standard has got to be looked at, because we're looking at kitchens, bathrooms, windows and doors again. Keeping that housing revenue account in as good a condition as possible brings benefits to our residents, and the improvements, so air source heat pumps, solar panels, the insulation grants that we've got is making life better for our residents in Derby Homes property. And I've got to say other properties across the city, because of government grants that have given us the opportunity to do that extra work. So, you know, Councillor Shanker can be disingenuous about what we are doing, about the forecasts that we've had, and about how we shouldn't have put the council tax up last year because of these underspends. But he needs to recognise that there is work going on across our portfolios to improve the outcomes for people in this city. And I think that the people of the city will recognise that. I just hope that eventually Councillor Shanker ends up recognising it as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Webb, for that remarkable detail in your contribution. Anybody else got anything else to say? No, in that case we have recommendations. It's 2.1 to 2.3. Can those be agreed? Super, thank you. Item 14 and is compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. Simon.
So thank you for this. There's only 3 items on this report this month, and 2 of those relate to the new primary school proposal for Snellsmoor Grange, Bolton Moor. The first is to reflect that the school is being a significant contribution from Section 106 funding, and that has been re-indexed, giving an additional 719,000 towards the primary school project. The report also asks you to note and approve the application of basic needs funding, which is the government funding of 889,000 in this year and 101,000 in the following year, including an allocation of 700,000 towards the new Snelsmore Grange Primary School. And the final item on here is the submission of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan. So the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is a follow-up to the European funding allocations that areas used to get. It's important to note that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is now allocated down to individual councils, and you can see there that the government has announced 6.1 million of shared prosperity funding to Derby, with April 22, so the current financial year, 746,000, 1.491 million the following year and 3.907 million the following year. In order to access this, we will have to submit an investment plan, which is agreed priorities with stakeholder engagement, which has been taking place. And at the moment, the government is indicating that needs to be submitted by the end of the month, and that will be picked up later on the agenda. So the recommendations are detailed in the report. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Executive scrutiny looked at this and resolved to note the report, I believe. Yes. Any comments, questions, further contributions? No. In this case, we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.7, if they can be agreed. Thank you. Item 16 is the annual report. Have we 15 have we got to do? All right, 16 next. Annual report and review of performance. Heather?
Yeah, I think it's item 15 first, which is the it's the end of year performance report. Yeah, happy to present. So this this paper presents an overview of delivery against the 2021-22 recovery plan and covers the final quarter of the year from January to March. At the end of the year, 65% of our performance measures hit target. 81% of actions had been completed or were on track against the timescale set, and 80% of the council's priority projects were assessed as either green or amber green. Overall, this presents a very positive performance for what has been another challenging year against the continued backdrop of COVID. We have highlighted key achievements in the report. Obviously, we have heard some of those achievements this evening, but ones that I would point to include the distribution of funding and wider support provided throughout the COVID period, which has allowed us to reduce the risk on business resilience within the city. Inward investment into Derby, and that's from both a private and a public sector point of view, has again allowed us to continue to support the city's recovery. Within the last quarter, we've obviously seen recognition of the services provided for children in need of help and protection, as well as children in care and care leavers. And we were inspected at the end of March and judged to be outstanding, which is an incredibly significant achievement for the council and the city. In terms of responding to need, we have continued to take action to respond to the risks around homelessness, despite increasing demands that we're seeing. And of course, as we've heard in our end-of-year budget report, we have provided a continued focus on value for money, with initiatives such as our spending panels providing continued challenge on the in-year spend. In the performance report, we have highlighted areas of risk, and I would draw Cabinet's attention to the timeliness of education healthcare plans, where we are suggesting that a performance surgery is recommended. Obviously, we're continuing to see demands in that area. And also increased risk rating around our colleague capacity risk within our strategic risk register, with an increase in terms of working days lost to sickness absence. So we're obviously continuing to monitor that closely. The report also includes a summary of our strategic risks, and again I would point members to paragraph 411, which just gives a summary in terms of changes around our strategic risks. We've also given detail around the overall targeted work that we have undertaken from both a performance and a risk point of view, and that can be found in paragraph 417. So overall, Cabinet are asked to note the report, including areas of achievement, risks and the targeted activities that have been completed. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you, Heather. There was a recommendation from exec scrutiny, but Councillor Repton's not been able to stay for this one. It's perhaps a little too positive in that the recommendation is that in relation to the recent Ofsted inspection of services provided to children in need of help and protection, the Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to agree and acknowledge the hard work achieved by all the officers and give praise to both the officers and the Council Cabinet for achieving the outstanding report from Ofsted and a number of fantastic details within the report of increased jobs and prosperity for Derby. And that appreciation is very much welcomed and will be taken forward by us and fed down the chain to those that have done the work. Councillor Williams, did you want to add to that at all?
Yes, I'd like to say that I'm extremely grateful to have such an amazing team that I work with. They are dedicated to improving the outcomes of children and young people in the city, and this outcome is very well justified. I would like to thank everybody involved, including councillors who are, as you know, corporate parents, and we all have a responsibility to our looked after children. So a massive, massive thank you to everybody. It's not over. We still have improvements to make and we still have a plan to follow, and we will indeed do that, and we will do that at, an outstanding pace, shall I say, and we shall make sure that we continue to do that.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you, Heather, for you and Sarah and the team for keeping us on our toes and making sure we don't lose sight of the need for performance indicators throughout the year. Any comments or questions? No, in that case it's 2.1 and 2.3 in terms of recommendations. Can they be agreed? Super. Heather, item 16.
Thank you, Chair. So this item follows on very nicely from the previous item. This is our annual report, so this presents our kind of full year of progress, and is a key document in terms of communicating that progress to our colleagues and wider citizens and partners. The document obviously includes highlights from our recovery plan, alongside a summary of the financial information from the year-end budget outturn. We've obviously highlighted areas of achievement. We have also included areas of risk that we recognise in the document itself. I do overall think that there is an awful lot to be proud of with this document. It has been a very, very challenging year. And actually, I think it's all credit to our colleagues, to our councillors and to our partners in terms of actually what we've been able to achieve for the city and the outcomes that we have delivered through our recovery plan. Obviously, we have included quite a bit of kind of detail to just underpin that. So, as well as the user-friendly summary that we've included, there is also a detailed appendix. So, This, I was going to say, overall, this annual report will get presented to Audit and Governance Committee alongside the Statement of Accounts. But overall, Cabinet are just asked to note the annual report and the annual review of performance, and we will publish that accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. So from my point of view as Leader of the Council, just to acknowledge the efforts and work and success of officers from across the board, from those that have had to work throughout COVID, throughout delivering street services for the council, right to the top through the directors and strategic directors to the chief executive and my hard-working cabinet members. So congratulations to them for that, and long may it continue with you checking, you and Doris checking us here and there as we go along, Heather. So thank you for that. Item 7 is the council delivery plan. 17 is the council delivery plan.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet may remember that back in February you approved a new council plan, which was then endorsed by full council in March. So at the time that the document was approved, it was noted that an annual delivery plan would be presented to Cabinet, which provides the specific actions and timescales that we will take over the next 9 to 12 months. So these actions will form the basis of a monitoring framework that, of course, we report quarterly and include measures that will enable us to assess the progress and impact. As with the recovery plan that we saw for last year, it's proposed that the plan remains dynamic, just to ensure it's focused on the right areas, and we obviously reflect any new issues that emerge during the year. So key things to note as part of the report: targets will be presented in the autumn, so alongside a summary of our strategic risk and priority projects, and we will of course undertake monitoring of the measures and milestones that are included, and that will be brought to Cabinet for the first time at the end of Q2 in November. So Cabinet are asked to approve the document. Thank you.
Thank you. I should actually have got agreement to recommendation 2.1 on item 16 for the formality of that, please, Cabinet. Thank you. Comments, questions on item 7, the council delivery plan? No? Well, again, from my point of view, Heather, it's absolutely excellent work. I think we've hit the mark with the plan. We're not perfect on everything. We never will be, but we are in the business of constantly reviewing the plan and what it is we do, and eminently well supported by yourself and the team and the efforts of everybody concerned. So thank you for that. There are recommendations 2.1 to 2.3 on item 17. Can they be agreed? Thank you. Item 8 then, another positive report, this time in connection with the inspection of the local authority children's services. Andy.
Thanks, Chair. And this runs very smoothly from item 15 around our performance monitoring and the annual report. But so in March of this year, Children's Services in Derby was inspected under the Ofsted ILACS framework, which stands for Inspection of Local Authority Children's Services. This was the first judgment inspection of the service since 2017. If you don't know already, the final inspection report was published on the 11th of May 2022, and I'm massively delighted and proud to formally report to Cabinet that the overall effectiveness judgment for Children's Services in Derby was judged to be outstanding. At the point the report was published, and this continues to be the case to date in terms of reports that have come out since our report was published on the 11th of May, Derby is only one of 3 cities outside of London to be judged outstanding for overall effectiveness. And if you look at the individual judgments, you'll see that for help and protection, we were judged to be outstanding, which puts us in the top 9% of authorities nationally. And we were in our 2017 inspection for help and protection requiring improvement. So the jump from requiring improvement to outstanding in that particular judgment in one inspection cycle is really, really, really good. In fact, it's outstanding, but it's very, very positive. I mean, it's a really tremendous achievement. I mean, all seriousness for children and families in Derby, and it's real testimony to the dedication, commitment, and hard work of all of our frontline staff, managers, senior leaders across early help and children's social care. Even more amazing, given that this was achieved during a pandemic. We've talked here many times around the implications and the impact that had on families and on our staff. But I think it's also important to put this judgment in a wider corporate context as well. It's really evident when you look at the report that this is a whole council outcome that sits not just within children's services but across the whole council. Councils are not judged outstanding without strong political and corporate ownership of the children's services agenda, and you can see that as a really strong thread when you read the report. So there are 2 areas for improvement. We've got to submit an action plan. That's just how these inspections work by the middle of August, which we're well on with there. But I just ask Cabinet to formally agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.3.
Thank you, Andy. Exec Scrutiny did look at this report last night and thankfully were able to recognise the good work, and they resolved to welcome the report and the fact that Children's Services have got an outstanding Ofsted inspection, and to thank the hard work and dedication of the officers in delivering this, and that they should be applauded and celebrated in their success, and to add to its thanks to the leader, the relevant Cabinet member, the Chief Executive and the relevant Director, Andy Smith. Listen folks, this is outstanding. I don't remember, have we ever had this level of report? So it's a first for the council, and you're right, Andy, it's a whole council achievement, with everybody stepping up to the mark and being able to answer all the questions, and they are searching questions from the inspection team, but ultimately we can applaud ourselves for the work, but the satisfaction for me, and I'm sure for the team, is the outcomes for the young people that we serve, and the reason why we do it. So from my point of view, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for this outcome. I don't think it could have been any better. Good. So go on then.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, as I said earlier, I am extremely, extremely proud of the team. But I would just like to draw your attention to a paragraph there, and it says, an impressive and committed senior leadership team ensures that children living in Derby City receive a constantly good and often outstanding response from their services. And I would like to personally thank Andy and his leadership over the years for ensuring that we have this team. Andy works fantastically with all of our partners. He is a true leader, and with him and his team, under Sue-Ann Lim's leadership, we have managed to achieve this outstanding report. This isn't just a report, this is about delivering services for children and young people, and I'm extremely proud of all of our team. So I do want to say that again, because this is a first for the City Council since it has been a City Council, and it is really important moving forward, that we maintain what we have got in our delivery, and that we continue to provide outstanding services for our children and young people and make sure that they have those outcomes. So I am really, really proud, and I just want to say a massive thank you to Andy and the whole team.
Thank you. It's frowned on in government, but we can do what we like here, so I'm going to give the leader a round of applause for that, for the whole council. Good. Excellent. Yes, Councillor Schenker.
I'll be brief again. I echo everything that said and pass on congratulations from the Labour Group to all officers of the Council, particularly those involved directly with children's services and the leadership there. All councillors involved and all partner organisations involved. It's fantastic news for the city, and particularly for our young children. And let's not forget, and I don't want to get too political here, there's plenty of time to do that, but let's not forget all this delivered after years and years and years of austerity. It's been challenging times, children's services, rightly so, have been prioritised and protected wherever possible by consecutive administrations. We all must remember that's absolutely the right thing to do. They should always be prioritised and looked after. And this result has come because of successive administrations advised by professional officers to be able to do that and get results like this. So I echo everything others have said and offer our congratulations to everyone as well.
Thank you for that. It's appreciated. And I'm sure that message will be passed on. Any other comments, questions? No, in that case we've got recommendations 2.1 to 2.3, if they can be agreed. Thank you. Moving on then to item 19, and that is a resolution to result for the Cabinet